right, greetings. Here we are. We're going to discuss the practice of tincture making. Why tinctures? Tinctures are, it's a great way to extract and preserve the medicinal components of our plant allies. And also, they are readily digestible and bioavailable to enter the bloodstream. So another effective way of using plants. What is a tincture, if you don't know? A tincture is an extract of plant material in a menstruum, which is a liquid, is something to extract the plant material out. Typically, we're talking about alcohol or an alcohol and water mix, as most herbs have components which are alcohol soluble and water soluble. So if we have parts that are acid soluble, that requires us to add apple cider vinegar into the mix. At other times, we're just using alcohol as our menstruum. You can use vinegar or glycerin. People have seen for sale vinegars, herbal vinegars, and glycerites, which are the same process we're going to discuss here, but instead of using alcohol, they use either glycerin or vinegar. So let me just show some different parts of tincture making. We have a tincture of roots, and here we have a tincture of leaf material. So when we do our tinctures, you have to know what part of the plant you're extracting or you're harvesting, and then how to extract that, and if you can do it fresh or dry. This is Chinese red sage, an herb very important right now with our COVID situation. Chinese red sage, you harvest the root, and we dry the root. Before we dry the root, you chop the root. And all the ways that we make tinctures, we use a scale, and we weigh out our plant material, and we do everything to a ratio. For fresh herbs, such as you see here with white horehound, that ratio would be 1 to 2. So for every gram of white horehound, we'll do 2 milliliters of menstruum. For a dried herb, that would be 1 to 5. For every gram of dried herb, you would do 5 milliliters of menstruum. And mainly the difference being fresh herbs are loaded with water, dried herbs, you've removed the water component. So Maya is chopping up this white horehound, which we just harvested, and now we want to turn into a tincture. So for us, for our purposes, like I said, we would put it on here, we'll weigh it out, and we'll do the calculations. For today, for our class, for most of you, just to try and get you familiar with the process, we want to show you the folk method, very easy and powerful way of making medicine and regenerating that relationship and gaining trust in yourself and in the plants as well. So the first step is to chop up. You always want to chop up your plant material right before you process it, not too early because it can oxidize and become more inert. So just before you process it, chop it up. It increases the surface area for extraction. So as she's chopping it up, then you simply pack the jar.
And you could chop it finer than I'm doing right here, certainly.
But we want to just pack the jar. And, for most people, you're not going to need a ton, of this. This is going to make quite a bit of tincture for an individual or for a small family.
Right. So in general, and we use these recycled jars, so you don't need to buy anything fancy. Just say we prefer to use jars with wider mouths. It's easier to when you're
done to get it out of the jar
exactly.
at the end.
And also
keep
to
that
pack
in mind.
it in there to cover it. So this jar is nice. We can see right through it. We're going to keep it in the dark after we make it, but for right now, it lets us see everything that's going on.
Plants grow and generate all their power via the power of photosynthesis in the sunlight, but they yield that power medicinally to us, typically in the darkness. So once we have that, then we've gone ahead and we have a menstruum here, which is this is just vodka. 40 proof vodka. So you have
or
alcohol
40%
and
80 proof.
Sorry, 40. Yeah. So in this, you already have water and alcohol. If you are using moonshine or Everclear or that 95+% alcohol, you do have to cut that with water, distilled water, usually 50-50. Again, to make sure you're getting the water soluble components as well, and not burning your tongue off every time you take your medicine. So she's going to add just a little bit more here. We pack the jar, or as much as you feel you need or can harvest. You're not always going to available to pack the jar with every harvest, nor do you need to.
Press it down if you're doing this method. Chop it up as finely as you can.
Right, and then we simply want to go ahead and cover. You want to make sure the whole thing is covered, and let it digest a little bit. You'll see that it drinks and the menstruum level goes down. We go ahead and the main reason you don't want to just overdo it and fill the whole jar up one time is all you're doing is diluting your final product. So that's the beauty of weighing it out. All that's finalized and figured out. We know we're not going to dilute our final product. But here with the folk method, basically you just don't want to over dilute it, but you want to make sure you've got enough alcohol in there to do the job, to fully extract and preserve, and that the herb is all covered as much as possible, so it doesn't lead to any rarely will it ever happen, but some herbs, usually ones that are full of liquid, like possibly jewelweed, people have had mold problems with. But essentially this is the first step of making a tincture. We've harvested, chopped, and got the herb covered in our menstruum. We want to label it clearly with the date, the name and the date, 10/4/20 of when we're putting this herb, when this herb was made into a tincture. And then we want to put it in the dark, a separate cool dry space, and allow this to macerate, sit for about 3 weeks minimum. And it is best if every day you go in and you give it a good shake around, and that just stirs up the whole process. It allows you're getting more extraction out of it. You're interacting with it, you're infusing it with your energy, with your intentions. So it's just a practice that we like to do. After you shake it, don't forget to go ahead and recompact it down. And the longer that it sits, the less this is going to be an issue. After about a day or so, it's really going to have drank up or started to be digested by your menstruum, and it's not going to.
And much finer chopping we would normally do than this. I just didn't have time.
And what we do, and I wanted to show you what we have here, another herb is Bidens, another amazing herb for these times, antiviral and for all these conditions. But Bidens, you can tell this is a leaf harvest. Well, it doesn't look like leaves. It looks kind of like a milkshake, a leaf milkshake or something. Well, that's because we do process that in the tincture. We give it a vortex it, swirl it, completely turn it into a slurry. That way it's completely exposed for extraction. And then at the end of maceration time, minimum 3 weeks, sometimes ours we let them sit for many weeks to many months. Then we take this and we want to pour it out through whether a nut bag, cheesecloth. You can dump the whole contents of this into a nut bag over a bowl, collect the tincture in the bottom, wring out the mark, as it's called, which is the herbs left in your cheesecloth or bag. We do this way by processing it like this, sort of necessitates the need to have a mechanical press, a hydraulic type press, to really press out all the liquid. But if you just do it this way, dumping it into cheesecloth and squeezing it is typically good enough to get it all extracted into a bowl, and then you pour that off into dark colored amber jars and store them in a cool, dry environment for usage. As far as tincturing, how do you use your tinctures? You place them right under your tongue for easy entry into your bloodstream, or you can mix them in a shot glass, many different tinctures or one tincture, put it in a shot glass and take that. Some people prefer to mix it with a cup of juice. Sometimes it depends on the herb that you're taking, but always do take with plenty of fluids. And the amount of drops, sometimes with some herbs it's 1, 2, or 3 drops, it's 5 to 10 drops, it's 15 to 20, it's 30 to 60, it's up to a teaspoon or a tablespoon. Depends on the herb, depends on the condition, and depends on the individual.